my dog will start barking. Okay, so let's see. Today is October 5th. This is a public stream for our implementation of the incident manager expansion that we have. And so thanks, Lucas and Mark, for joining. Actually, before I started the stream, I was just asking Lucas if the information that we had out there was useful so far. And Lucas, you were mentioning the fact that you've done Dev on Call before, and so maybe a useful exercise is going to be kind of like some shadowing exercises, and I'll note that we have that set up in because we're expecting to do kind of a more of a prolonged shadow for this, because we want to get right now we have a very small number of people involved in doing the incident manager rotation. I mean, there's like 4 people, and basically kind of trade 12-hour shifts, and that's just it's kind of long been untenable. And so obviously the design of this one is, to be something where we have, the many hands make light work type of approach to this, and getting a lot more people involved in, shorter 4-hour shifts that hopefully can be aligned with time that typically working anyways, with the caveat, of course, being on the weekend. That's not a typical time that any of us are working. But we recognize that also is going to require a prolonged period of when we're still doing shadowing, and so we're still going to have those shifts, and honestly, those of us that are participating in them are, I think, having encouraged ourselves to do them because we can see like the vision on the other side, and especially those that have been doing it more often. It's not, I've been participating in them for a little bit. It's people like Dave, who just joined, and Jarv and others who have really been shouldering a lot of this. And so for at least the first couple of months, what we're going to do is figure out how to have someone who's been an incident manager before basically shadowing when there are incidents. And we were talking earlier today in another meeting that it's I don't know if it's ironic or what the right term is to use here, but we're probably going to have to come up with and are talking about doing some other kind of fake incidents, like kind of what we call them, tabletop or game day, incidents or whatever. And we did those when we introduced the communications manager role last year, and actually Dave led a bunch of those because for example, this past week there were not any page outs to the IMOC. That doesn't mean there was nothing for the IMOC to do, but I think a lot of and actually, Dave, maybe this is a good question for you. Like, you've been busy in the past day helping with some incidents that infrastructure is dealing with. I think they're in some ways that probably, even if we had this rolled out, that probably still would have been the same. And there's a question of whether or not, I don't know if we would have had that role to the incident manager that's on call for kind of like these Sev 2 or Sev 3 issues that don't necessarily get a page out, or if they basically end up being kind of like infrastructure leadership, infrastructure management type engagement.
Yeah, we'll need to take a lens on that one, because when a data restore situation kind of comes up, I think that may be specific to an infrastructure leader needing to help make a decision, because it was just coordinating with support of who's doing what and what are we communicating back to the affected party, where at that point that was me talking to the particular infrastructure engineers, making a decision of, yes, we're going to engage the restore process and those things. So that's yesterday was kind of a special case.
Yeah. And that and so in that case, because I want to be careful and I guess sensitive to the way I phrase things, like to say that the the incident manager over the past week hasn't had anything to do in the way that we run things today is not correct. Like Dave's been very busy, but I guess it's
Yeah.
been very busy with things that are more related to infrastructure, leadership, and management, not so much public facing incidents. So yeah.
Correct. Yeah, that was yesterday was just busy, but that's where I would have expected had an incident manager gotten involved that I would have been escalated to in that situation for the infrastructure coordination. Again, the incident manager is really, again, I hate to use sports analogies, but it's kind of the quarterback. Like, are we moving? And if you don't have the right people to help keep things moving along, then bring in those parties. So and that's what I think, going back to the tabletop exercises, I think we can draw some things up like that so that everybody gets practices. Because actually one of these data restore situations might be a good thing, Steve, to help everybody know, like, this is, my scope is trying to make sure things are moving along, but this is who I know how to reach out to. So I think maybe that's something you and I can work on. Is like, I think it's probably coming up with a set of scenarios around data restore. I think the other one that we pulled on the support team that I think is just a good one is GitLab's down. What do I do as an incident manager? What are the different things I need to do? Because I think that was what we were trying to practice with the communications manager, was like, okay, what do I need to do? We were trying to get the familiarity with status IO so they understood what things to click, what caused tweets to happen, all that kind of stuff. I think a similar scenario would be good for the incident managers of getting through like data restore situations, GitLab's down situations, so that, like, to me, there's those things like, I need to know how to engage the dev on call process. I need to know how to engage the communications manager so that, the point of those practice things is not like, oh, great, now I need to remember where the handbook page is, what to read, and how to do those things. Like, knowing that there is a handbook page, like, you're never going to remember the content of those things. The handbook shifts around enough, but at least knowing how to engage those processes and knowing, like, at this stage in this type of incident, that's when I need to know how to reach out on this help.
So is this not? Oh, sorry. Is this not like a high level run book? Essentially, is what we're talking about. Like, what's the?
There isn't, because the scenarios can vary so much. So that's why I was thinking, like, it might be good actually for you all to maybe develop like some of these scripts around like a couple of different situations. Because I think if I step back and categorize some of the things I've seen as incident manager, then I can provide maybe some of those kinds of run books of like, hey, here's what goes through my head. But at this point, after doing it for 2 years, I'm not even sure I'm thinking about what I'm doing to teach it. So I need to take the second and do that. But I think going through those scenarios would be a good way to do it. And that might give you, Lucas, some of that run book like thing. But there's so many different scenarios that I think it's more about what's in your tool belt for when am I concerned as an incident manager? What am I doing to ask for help? And if you know what those things are that are available to you, then that helps you work through those difficult situations, depending on what they are.
I think to that point too, I think as we go through these, and getting some reps in with shadowing and experiencing incidents that occur, it probably would be wise for us, like myself, speaking for myself, to be updating, whether it's the run books or just notes along the way, or the handbook or scenarios of what to do when this happens. Because I think as we start getting more people into the mix who might be maybe less experienced with these, all the types of scenarios that could potentially occur, having a go-to will help not necessarily reduce the anxiety. I think there's always going to be, especially your first time, there's going to be certain things that you want to make sure you do right, make sure you coordinate, bring people in accordingly, but it could help in that transition as we start getting more people into the fray.
Yeah, I'm looking. I've worked with Dan and Chun and some other folks around incident manager stuff. So we had some handbook pages we were starting. So I was going to try to get those to you. Give me just a sec.
Yeah, I think that the let's see, just writing this on handbook pages. I think another a part of this is kind of the to make sure that we've documented well what are the high level questions, and I think on the onboarding page, which I'll find that. Actually, I think we have that at the top of the document. There's a link to the onboarding item, and looking to see if that's actually the right one. Maybe it's not. Incident management. Basically, the questions that as an incident manager, what you should be looking at. And actually, I think I've got, so on the general incident management page, handbook page, like some just reminders of what the key responsibilities are, and maybe if we can build out this, or I think to the point, like, some run book information of like, what are those very common things that as you're going through the course of an incident, you should be asking yourself. And part of being, an incident manager is kind of, periodically going through like this checklist of things. Do we understand what the current impact to users is? Has that been communicated to them? And in a number of these things, there's I think, Dave, your sports analogy, I think you used quarterback, or like the quarterback, but basically the leader of whatever the team is on the field, I guess
it's probably actually more of coaching.
Pick your sport, or whatever is isn't necessarily directly doing everything, but it's making sure that everyone understands what needs to be done. And so in the case of, do we understand what the current impact is, and have we communicated that? When you're engaged as an incident manager, there's also going to be a communications manager who's going to be someone from support that is there, and their role is specifically to do that communication. They do the status page updates, they do the the tweets when those are required, and then they also do any of the communication like that may come in back and forth with customers in Zendesk, as well as like sharing the updates with the rest of the support team, who may be fielding requests from customers as well. And and then there are the questions of, do we have the right people involved? Do we need to, are there escalations that need to be done, for example, like the dev escalation? Are there escalations that need to be done to bring in other infrastructure engineers, or direct reach outs to various teams in engineering related to the problem, or even escalations to others in infrastructure, including Dave mentioned kind of like escalating to another infrastructure leader, or in the case of like a long lasting SEV1, there's an hour kind of window where, regardless of time of day or week of year, like there's an escalation that would come to me, and then I would clue in Eric, for example. So
So
I actually linked to the run book, which is 7 months old. That's due for an update. That was my starting point, Lucas, that I had a while ago, but it's due for an update because we actually have a better ability to roll back and some other things like that are not in there. So I'll give that an update.
Well, that gives us a target for some MRs. At least that's good.
Yep.
So looking at this, like it's great to have like even a basic idea of like check app decks, check error rates. Here's some dashboards to look at. And in terms of like, I think that this is well documented in terms of communicating, I guess that like the high level responsibilities, like keeping an issue up to date, ensuring stakeholders are aware of things. The part that I feel like is a bit fuzzier is engaging SMEs on subject matters. And in that case, like, let's say it's a North America Sunday, and I would normally like ping someone in the Gidley channel if we need someone like stat to engage on something. Assuming that there is not an active workday going on with individuals participating. I guess I'm not really sure do I text the engineering manager
Okay.
of a specific team.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, that's something we probably need to develop more. Weekends are a special case, so I think we probably ought to make a new section that talks about weekends. My MO, Lucas, in the past has been like assess the severity of the situation of like, can this wait on the weekend till Monday? Because Monday for APAC in particular, like if you need to get a hold of Dylan or somebody, that's Monday at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or Tuesday. So what I'm trying to say, Sunday at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon,
Mhm.
you've already got Dylan and some folks in Australia online on our Monday. So, keeping the times, I'm giving you a very direct answer to this, so I'll write it down to you. But the other piece of that is when it has been bad enough, and that's been like 2 or 3 times in the last 2 years, depending on the severity, I've either gone, yes, directly texted a manager. More often than not, I actually start with Christopher and say, I need help. Because both Christopher and Steve are pretty good about being responsive even on the weekends, should that be needed. But like I said, it's been 2 or 3 times in the last 2 years, but it's been go to Christopher or Steve and say, we're at a situation, this is severe enough, I'm going to need to get help. Because that way I've got the extra help too of if I'm trying to help manage the incident, I can get a help from a Christopher or from somebody like that to help reach out, because they know the developer tree a little better than I do. Because I think one of the other hard things is navigating, if you're the engineer, if you're the incident manager and you're trying to make sure the incident's moving along okay with the people you do have, the last thing you need to do is be navigating the team chart and then a spreadsheet to find phone numbers and trying to text people. I think in your case, Lucas, you may actually know that even better than I do. But there's been times where I've engaged help to say, like, I need, I'll either reach out to a director or Christopher or something like that to just help me find that help and get an SME. Because I can go to him and say, I need help on GitLab or having a specific performance problem there. And then you've, as an incident manager, kind of tasked off the like figuring out who and reaching that person and getting the help.
Yeah, makes sense.
But I'll cover that because the weekends are a special scenario. Yeah, the rest of the time it is going to the Slack channel, use the standard dev escalation process. So getting familiar with those, but you actually covered a good gap of like, if I'm on the weekend and concerned, what do I do to get help? We'll do that. And I think that's where, Steve, I'd want to clarify with you and Christopher that that's the okay thing for us to document to do.
Text Steve. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to confirm that part of this is I want to make sure that we are available as much as possible, and especially myself. I mean, I think everyone. I appreciate everyone who has signed up to do this, and I know that that we all do. I think kind of leading various efforts, and we tried to make this so that it can be part of again, the weekends are kind of a, as Dave put, like a special a special situation. On the other hand, they're this is my opportunity to like jinx things or whatever, but like, and generally the weekends are also a lot quieter. There's certainly less change activity going on. There's basically less activity overall going on, but of course the availability of staff is different on the weekends. But I just want to note that like I want to be as available as possible, like if I anytime other than if I happen to be on a hike or something like that or whatever, I want to be available to make sure that someone that has taken on this role has the support that they need. So, and I know Dave feels the same, as do Jarv and Ken and everyone who's engaged with this. And for that matter, I think the other thing to note is that the engineer on call, kind of that primary engineer that is doing the effort. Most of our engineers on call could I would say, almost all of them could definitely do the incident management work as well, and know what needs to be done. It's just kind of like a separation of things so that we can have work done in parallel. That is the reason that we have two. So if there's ever a question, it's very likely that also the engineer on call or the communications manager may very well know what needs to be done, and it's just you can get also direction from them too.
Yeah, I think the core thing on that. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
No, I was going to say, it sounds like it's a very similar pattern with like So, as Dave was describing, there's things that he could certainly handle, but he passes off to Chris in the same sense. The EOC, certain things they can handle, but then they pass off to the incident manager. And so I think it's just like that, doing things in parallel to make things a little more efficient and obviously get closure to, an incident as efficient as possible is kind of what my takeaway is so far.
Yeah, I think that'd be the core thing I share is when you start to feel overwhelmed, that's the time to ask for help. Because it's if I'm trying to do two things at once and I need to go look at a spreadsheet to look up a phone number, but I'm trying to do something else, and that's the time to ask help, to say, can somebody else help me find this phone number to get help? It's not that often, but in past roles, past companies, I've had that kind of thing where it's like, I don't have the cycles at the moment to go do what is the simple task. It's okay to ask for help in those situations and get somebody who isn't trying to handle the other thing you're trying to handle to do that quick thing. And similarly, again, an incident manager, there's so much also just paying attention to like, how is the incident going, that's where, if you get rabbit holed in focusing your attention on a particular problem, you lose the scope of how is everything going overall. So again, that's the time to ask for help.
So I know since this is an AMA, one of the questions I saw very recently was a question regarding, I think it was around coverage on the weekends for certain countries. Did that get answered? I don't know if it did, or if that's something that we need to address somehow through an MR or update our format for coverage. Steve, do you know if that had been touched upon or answered?
Yeah, so actually so in the planning for this, before we merged the recent MRs to like document the expansion and everything, we did that and worked along with both HR and with legal on covering that. And there are a couple of locations and a couple of PEOs that we work with where there's an outstanding question. There's literally only there's a couple or a few, and so in those cases we're definitely not asking those individuals to do anything that's not kind of clearly allowed within their contract. I think the other thing that I'll note is that the underlying intention of this is absolutely not to have anyone work any more than they would. And so and of course the weekends are the part that kind of that complicate that statement. But the thing that we want to do is, like, if you're when you commit to do this, there is a when you're on call, there's an awareness of that you have. It isn't a trivial thing. Like, you're on call, you can feel it, you know that there's a little bit of like, hey, am I going to get paged or not? Are we going to have an incident? And that isn't, from a personal experience perspective, that's not free. And so it's like, if you work a Saturday and you're on call and there are no incidents, that doesn't mean that you weren't on call. You still worked, and so, you still need to recover. And so the point of when you're working a weekend is what we, want people to do is basically to shift their weeks. And if you're covering a weekend, there should be adjacent, weekdays within the kind of week that you're working that you're taking off. None of this is an ask or an expectation that people work 7 days a week, or the whole weekend and end up working 12 days in a row or whatever. That is not what we want for anybody. So, well, thank you for that question, though, because I think that's something that is certainly on people's minds anytime there's an on-call type of program. So.
Yeah, I will say that this process, and Dave and Steve know this, I've been certainly been putting up MRs and trying to think of other things that that I can think of to help polish this. But for this being certainly our best attempt at trying to cover all bases here, it's a really good step forward. And I think just from not being a part of this yet, I think a lot of the questions are getting answered and helping with some of the concerns or structure or format around how this is all going to come together. And definitely, I think getting a few reps in, going through the shadow process, and being able to see those things in action, and seeing, the things that, people are looking at, common things that, certainly both, Steve and Dave have, that both of you look at, going through these incidences will only help, get people feel more comfortable with it too. To classify me into on call, I at previous jobs, I've been on call, for, every single day for every single day of the year in either a direct or indirect capacity, and for 9 years, and, in 10 years. So, the structure or the ask of, 4 hours a day for 3 days in a row, especially knowing that I'm not the only person that's getting paged. Like, I know it's going to a whole lot of, or a few other people more than myself. I think that also helps with, some of those initial questions that other folks may have.
Yeah, thank you for the comments,
thanks.
and thank you for the engagement in helping to improve some of the information and everything. That's very much appreciated. So, I do see we're at time. Thank you, Mark, for joining, and Lucas has a drop, but thanks to Lucas as well, and appreciate everything. So